All right, everybody. I am excited. We're live. We got a ton of people cycling into the room. So welcome, welcome. We are so excited to bring this content to you. We're going to be talking about Azure Government Virtual Machines. And we have virtual machines in the government cloud. Now, this is the one obviously we're going to focus on today. This is a different scenario. This is going to be a situation where you spin up a virtual machine, right? And if you've never seen one of those before, it is essentially no different than working on your local desktop. It's just that all of the processing and the machine itself actually exists on a machine in a data center running as a virtual program. It's really cool because now your machine is in the Azure government space where it's compliant, as opposed to your local network, which may or may not be compliant depending upon what you've done so far. So instant compliance. Now there's, again, some things you have to do, some setup you have to do there. But again, the idea here is you take your whole machine and make it compliant. Now, what's interesting about that is you can run programs in the Azure government environment off of servers, computers, just like you would locally, but there's a couple of key differences. Number one, you eliminate the entire hardware layer. There's no more hardware to fail. Microsoft just takes care of that. Backup is much, much easier and nearly instantaneous because it's all at data center speed. Your internet speed on that machine is going to be at data center speed. I was on a virtual machine just yesterday fooling around, and I did a speed test, and the speed test was over 3 gigabits per second. 3 gigabits per second. How much more efficient would your employees be if they had a 3 gigabit per second? That's 3,000 megabits per second speed as they're going about their daily tasks. A lot more efficient, I think. If the internet moved at that kind of speed, it's incredible. Numerous advantages. One more advantage is you can actually access a virtual machine in the Azure Government Cloud with a non-compliant device. And as long as there's no redirection going on, you're okay. So now all of a sudden, we don't have to replace or upgrade or secure even the machines in our office. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere very, very interesting. So lots and lots of ways that virtual machines in the government cloud could exist. We could just simply choose to not do anything to our local network at our office. We could spin up a couple of virtual machines in the Azure government cloud, and then we could install Outlook, and we could install GCC High Email, and we could install even our AutoCAD software. Yes, virtual machines will work just fine in high graphic processing programs. You just have to resource it properly, and we can help you do that. So yes, you can have full engineering companies sitting there in the Azure government cloud. And the best part is all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if they're working from home or the office or on their computer or on your computer there at the office that you, the owner, paid for. It doesn't matter anymore if they're working on a personal device because you can cut off access. You can dictate what gets access. You have total and complete control. It's a huge advantage, huge advantage. And again, all of a sudden, you don't have to do anything in your own environment to be compliant, other than maybe some physical security controls, which are not really a big deal. Now, what in the world is an Azure Government Virtual Machine? If you think about your current desktop or laptop, you sit in front of a computer and have an experience with it, right? You've got a start menu, you've got icons on the desktop, you've got applications you can run. However, that computer is not being fully utilized. Right now, my computer, while I'm giving this presentation, has tons and tons of spare processing power that is just simply not being utilized. Again, here's a great example. I'll try to see if I can pull up maybe Task Manager here, see if we can have a little experiment. So I'll pull up Task Manager and we'll look at our performance. And we realize, look at that, CPU utilization. Actually, my CPU utilization is kind of high. It's going back down. It must have just been doing that to check out what was going on as it was starting up Task Manager. But again, I've got over 50% of my processor that is just kind of sitting idle. From a memory perspective, I've got more than half the memory that I have going on here, which is, again, just really honestly not being used at all. If we look at our disk activity, barely using any disk activity here, using like 1% and 5% of disk activity. So many more resources that could be used with higher levels of efficiency if I just had a second and third user who was actually working off my computer. And I know what you may be thinking, is that secure? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Every user gets their own session. Every user has their resources locked down by their ID, right? So again, you don't give a user permissions to go into another user's folders. And that's all totally legit, very compliant. It works the same way on your local network. So there are times when it sits idle and isn't working to its maximum extent, and virtual machines can help us be more efficient. Virtual machines are the same exact identical Windows desktop experience but accessible from anywhere on any device, and with scalable resources attached that normally are in a data center where computers and servers operate best. One huge advantage is the elimination of the entire hardware layer. Again, no more buying of computers, and you can buy less expensive computers at that. All those computers need to do is just access the virtual machine. You can do that with a $300 thin client that'll last you the next 7 years. It's an incredible solution and something that we're huge fans of. We've been doing virtualization for at least 15 plus years, and I gotta tell you, it works really, really well, and it's more secure. Next, what is an Azure Government Virtual Machine, and what's the difference? Essentially, it's your computer, but in the fully secure Azure Government environment where everything is already compliant. So best of all, it's now protected by your Microsoft Azure Government secure login. You can't even lose your computer and be in trouble. Literally, you can't walk through the airport and lose your computer because it's actually in the Microsoft data center. So you can't lose it. That eliminates a huge place where we can definitely have some problems. And again, it's just absolutely incredible because the whole Azure government environment is deemed to be compliant. Therefore, a virtual machine within it is compliant, and there is no more question about what is compliant, what is not. Really a big fan of that. Also, one other thing that's really cool is it uses your Microsoft Azure Government Secure Login. So automatically, we now get this single sign-on thing that is so complicated to set up in local networks. I know a lot of IT managers just sort of bang their head against the wall getting SSO or single sign-on to actually work correctly because of, all the different solutions. Well, it turns out if you just use the Microsoft environment the way it was meant to be used, all that stuff just works. Imagine that. You can't even lose. So again, everything is now by one user login. There's no multiple logins. It just works. So let me ask you a question. Is performance terrible because it's over the internet? This is always a huge concern. The answer is no. We've been doing virtual machines, like I said, for 15 plus years with clients. They love it. Performance actually is better because now the only bandwidth you need is the bandwidth to get the image of what would be on your screen and your keyboard and mouse inputs to that virtual machine. Very minimal bandwidth required. But the virtual machine itself, well, that virtual machine, pretty cool story. That's sitting in a data center with usually a 10 gigabit or better backbone. So actually, your experience is faster. It's really a cool concept because you're in a data center and you've got data center level speed. What if I need graphic intensive programs to run like CAD? I know this is the one where a lot of people, especially in engineering, really get hung up. They're like, Mike, we need to do our CAD stuff locally. No, you don't. No, you don't at all. You can absolutely do CAD and other graphically intensive programs in Azure Government via virtual machines. Here's the cool part. This is the part that I just really get a little tickled over. Let's say you need engineering compute power for like 2 days out of the month. Not uncommon, especially if you're not designing parts often, you're just designing them maybe as prototype before you start manufacturing them. You may just generally not need that machine every day. Well, you can spin up the resource and then shut it down when you're done, and you don't pay for it. You only pay for the minutes and hours used, which creates a lot of efficiency. Here's another one. Most people who are doing CAD that have more than one engineer, they're already doing a setup like this. They may have a very powerful CAD computer, and then they may have 3 or 4 people using remote desktop to get in and use it so that they can only have to buy one of these powerful machines. It works pretty good. It's a pretty good solution. However, you can really take that to the next level when it's in a virtual machine within Azure Government, because now that machine is compliant and your people can work from outside of the office and still be compliant. So now your engineers can finally work from home. They can work while they're on vacation, right? We love that. Just kidding. And of course, they can work from the office. More importantly, they can work from anywhere exactly the same way and in the same session, so they can transition from work to home to vacation and never miss a beat. It's so powerful. And one final thought, you can resource these machines to beyond what you can even resource a typical desktop with. I mean, data center grade type hardware. All right, you need 500 gigs of RAM, no problem. You need 32 gigs of RAM and video processing, no problem. All you do is check a radio button and move a slider and then reboot the machine. It's that easy. It's that easy. And again, these are machines that are designed to have multiple people working on them at a time. So again, I'm not going to tell you it's super cheap to run that kind of compute power. But then again, when you really factor in what these people are doing, and when you factor in the idea that you would probably be spending $10,000 to $20,000 on a good AutoCAD workstation, well, maybe it's not so expensive, right? So No problem with these CAD and graphic intensive programs. Is it expensive? Expensive is a good question because expense is relative. The reality is we're going to get into cost a little bit later in this webinar, but generally speaking, I would say that it is not expensive. You're going to have to pay something to maintain and manage your IT. You're going to have to pay subscriptions to antivirus and your application whitelisting and blacklisting software. You're going to have a lot of subscriptions when it comes to things that you need for NIST SP 800-171 compliance. So you're going to already have a lot of this expense anyway, whether you do it to your local network or a virtual network with Azure Gov. So then it's really just boiling down to paying for the compute power. And as a great example, if I can take 60 users and put them onto 10 virtual machines, it's not only not expensive, it might be more cost effective than doing a hardware refresh cycle every 3 years or 4 years on 60 users worth of hardware. And that's why this is such a popular solution. It's why it just makes sense. Here's another thing, no more hardware upgrades. We don't have to worry about that because there's no more hardware. All you need is a basic computer to access the environment. So there are a ton of cost-saving things that are built in here. Sure, it does cost some money, but is it expensive? Well, I think my answer is probably no. Just to give you an idea, we use one virtual machine for accounting, and we use one virtual machine for some confidential data processing that we have to do for our clients. And those two virtual machines, not very expensive. I don't even think we really pay I don't think we're paying more than $1,000 a month, maybe not even $500 a month. I'd have to check with accounting, but no, I don't think it's expensive. I actually think in many cases for defense contractors, when you factor in everything required for compliance, this might be less expensive than making what you've got compliant. Are there any disadvantages? I got to tell you, I don't really think that there are very many disadvantages. Once in a while, you might have a slight lag on a screen clip. And I don't really notice that anymore. It's just kind of something you get used to. And realistically, if the machine is resourced appropriately, you don't get that at all. Some people will say to you, hey, if the internet goes down, I can't access my machine. You guys, I think that's a silly argument. All right. These days, internet is right there with electricity. Number one, it's reliable. No, number two, look, let's be honest. If you don't have internet at your office, you're not working anyway. Here's the great advantage. Ready for this? Take your computer, take a laptop, take your phone, whatever, go to a coffee shop, and you can securely log in and just keep on working. Keep on cruising. Go home. Go to a hotel. Go anywhere you want that's got internet. Plug in. Go work. The best part is now all of a sudden your desktop isn't tied to your local office. Now that I think is a huge advantage. We're looking for disadvantages. I don't know. I can't really find any. There is cost to it. So there's a cost, but in terms of functional advantages and disadvantages and things like that, I don't really have a lot of disadvantages to tell you guys about. It's a really great experience.